All right, thanks everybody for coming to our first TOAD Learning Camp online travel education. We're going to do several of these over the next few weeks, maybe a few months, just exploring different modes of travel and different things that you might be interested in. And today we're going to talk about river cruising. I'm sure most of you recognize this person. These pictures were taken on our last river cruise. We're going to cover different regions to sail, different countries and rivers. When's the best time to cruise? The various river cruise lines. And selecting a cruise, plus the pros and cons of a river cruise. There's pretty much anywhere there's a river that's wide enough for a boat and deep enough for a boat, there can be a river cruise. And there's a lot of different kinds of river cruising. We're going to mostly talk about just the traditional river cruise. Europe is what's most people think of when they're thinking about going on a river cruise, and the Rhine and the Danube are by far the most popular itineraries. But there's also the Moselle and Maine and Elbe, and then over in France you've got the Bordeaux and the Seine, and the Rhone and the Saône, and then in Portugal the Douro. In Asia you've got both the Mekong and the Yangtze River. And what's interesting in Asia is they cruise at different times of the year based on their location. So you can pretty much go to Asia anytime and do a river cruise. And I believe, if I remember right, this is the Douro River. And then we've also got several rivers in Russia that you can do a river cruise to. In Africa, what's interesting with Africa is the Chobe and the Zambezi River. You can couple that with African safari as well. So that's kind of a nice option. And then in the United States, there's a lot of different cruises in the United States. The most popular ones that people hear about are the Mississippi River Valley, going up and down the Mississippi and sometimes over on the Ohio, or out west on the Columbia and Snake Rivers. They also talk about other, they call them river cruises, but they're really not river cruises. Charleston to Jacksonville, the islands of New England, the Great Lakes and Alaska waterways near Juneau. Those are all just coastal cruises, but a lot of companies do refer to them as river cruises as well. And this was taken in, I believe, Strasbourg when we were there last fall. The big things with when to cruise, there's a lot of questions to ask about this. There's not really an ideal time to go on a river cruise, just like there's not always an ideal time to go on an ocean cruise. The big thing is, where do you want to go with the cruise? Is the itinerary important? For example, if you want to go on the Rhine River, you're not going to go in January. There's no sailings then. So knowing if there's a certain thing that you want to do, certain itinerary, that's important. What do you want to see? If you want to see the Christmas markets, obviously you're not going to go in July. And what activities do you want to do while you're on the cruise? And here's an example of a Christmas market that you can see on a river cruise in Europe. The different cruise lines in Europe and around the world, AMA Waterways, that's who we cruised with last year. Viking River Cruises, Avalon Waterways, Uniworld Boutique River Cruises, U by Uniworld, which they've changed their marketing. Originally, it was going to be for young adults, and now they've expanded that. Scenic River Cruises, that's one of the all-inclusive cruise lines. Same with Uniworld. Emerald is mostly inclusive. Taup is all-inclusive. And Crystal River Cruises is all-inclusive as well. This chart's really, I found this one really kind of interesting. It kind of shows you where the general feel of the river cruise lines are. And you can see Avalon and Alamo Waterways are more in the contemporary and choice areas, where Viking, Taup, Uniworld, and Crystal are almost exactly opposite in the more structured and traditional. And then Emerald and Scenic are on the opposite sides of each other. This is kind of a good thing to keep in mind when you're trying to pick a river cruise, because while one river cruise line could be perfect for me, it may not be perfect for everyone. That's why we have so many different choices. This is a Viking cruise. Now in the United States, we've got the American Cruise Line and American Steamboat Company. The big difference between them is the Steamboat Company is where you're going to see the paddle wheelers. Victory Cruise Line is a small cruise line. They don't really do river cruises except for between the Hudson River Valley and the Great Lakes. And then Blount is another one. They mostly do the Great Lakes and some in the Caribbean. Viking is coming into the United States river cruise market, I believe in 2022. They're going to be doing the Mississippi River and the Great Lakes. And this gives you an illustration of the differences between the types of cruise ships on the rivers in the United States. This is a paddle wheeler down at the bottom, and up at the top, this is just your traditional river cruise ship. The front of the bow opens up, and then that's how you come into the ship. Selecting a cruise, first thing you need to know what is the most important aspect of the cruise for you. Is it the itinerary, the river, the weather, special events? If you want to do the Christmas market, you're not going to be going down the Nile River. If you want to do see the tulips in the spring, you're not going to be going in the fall. So that's probably the first thing that you have to decide is what's the most important thing to you. Next, your budget is really important. There's a wide range of pricing for river cruises, and yeah, river cruises tend to be a little bit more expensive than per diem than your ocean cruises. But it's also important to know what's all included with them. What your travel style is important as well. Do you want something that's really regimented and you have a set schedule for everything that you're doing, or do you want something that's a little bit more carefree and relaxed and you can do pretty much what you want? This picture is the upper left-hand side is a Uniworld cruise. Uniworld is, all their ships are different, but this is this general feel that you're going to get on a Uniworld cruise. Everything's included, and I believe they also have butlers in their rooms, and so it's a little bit more high-end in terms of what you're going to get on there. The room on the bottom right, this is one from Waterways, and the reason I included this one is I wanted to show you the difference between the two different kinds of balconies that you can have on a river cruise. Some of the river cruise lines believe that you shouldn't give up the space inside to have a balcony. This room has both a French balcony and an outside balcony. So the one on the left here is a traditional walkout balcony. The one on the right, the railing is right up next to the windows. So you can open up the window and you're still going to let the outside in, and kind of bring the outdoors into your room. Some of the cruise lines only have the French balconies. Some of them have an outside balcony, and AMA tends to have both. And this chart I thought was really good for comparing the different cruise lines and what you can get. For instance, with, let's just look at AMA and Avalon together. They show that excursions are included, your wine and beer at lunch and dinner are included. They don't include drinks 24/7, but they do have coffee, tea, and non-alcoholic beverages 24/7. So, and AMA has a happy hour 1 hour every night before dinner. They both have bicycles, fitness center, balconies. They don't have 2-room suites. So if that's something that you're interested in, that wouldn't be one that you'd want to select. And they also have, more information, port charges included, butlers, how many dining venues they have, and if the gratuities are included. So it's kind of nice to compare the different cruise lines this way. And you can see there's a wide range of per diem pricing. Teaming, which is a very budget line, is $200 per night per person, and going up to Crystal is $800 per night per person. So there's quite a difference between them. In the pros and cons of going on a river cruise, if you're the type of person that likes a lot of activity and likes to be entertained on a cruise, river cruise is probably not for you. If you need to be at trivia 3 times a day, no, not happening. It is still nice to be able to unpack once and visit many destinations. And one thing that's really important on a river cruise, they're not covering a lot of distance in one day. So you're taking a lot of time to go down the river and see a lot of different things. If you're afraid of being on water on a boat, a river cruise might be a really great option for you because you can see land all the time. And the funniest thing I heard is if the ship starts to go down, climb up to the top deck and you won't get wet. So this is a good thing if I have someone who is unsure about going on a boat, this is a good starter to try out. The vessels tend to be a lot smaller than the river cruises or than the ocean cruises. Usually you're going to have definitely less than 200 people on board, usually around 150 people on board. So the nice part about that is they really get to know you as well. One of the cons of going on a river cruise are the water levels. If it's a really dry year in August, you might not be going on a river cruise. But the advantage to that, the distance that they're covering, it is really pretty easy for them to move you around by motor coach. To some people, that's not their idea of a fun trip. And so if that is a big consideration on going on a river cruise, I would avoid the months that tend to have more issues with water levels. And the water levels go both ways. It can be too high and it can also be too low. If it's too low, they have to take you off the boat and they can't move the boat around because it's just not enough water. But if it's too high, they can't go underneath the bridges. So what they do in that case sometimes is they will start you on one ship, go to the next point, and then they'll move you to another ship and go down the river further. So it can be kind of a hassle. They do a great job of transferring you to the other ship if they have to do so. and they put you up at nice hotels if they can't put you on the ship. So there are alternatives, but if your main thing is that you want to go on a river cruise, I would definitely watch when the water levels are more, are going to allow you to do that. A lot of people will say that a French balcony is not a balcony. If you do have a balcony, it does take away from the space in the room. Now, some of the cruise lines have turned their rooms so that they are a little bit bigger, and you don't have as much of an issue, because the problem with a river cruise is they're limited with how wide the ship can be, because it has to go through those locks. And we found out on our cruise that you could literally reach out and not reach out very far and touch the wall. So it was a tight fit in a couple places. They cannot make those ships any larger. So having a French balcony allows you to have more space in your room, but it isn't a true balcony. Variety on board. This, I think, it really depends which cruise line you're going with. In some cases, there can be a lot of variety, but for the most part, you're going to have one main lounge, one main restaurant. There might be some secondary or third dining locations, but for the most part, it's going to be one of everything. So if you like to have a lot of options for dining and your beverages and bars to go to, river cruising might not be a good choice. The nice thing about river cruising for those who don't travel with children is there's usually not a lot of kids on a river cruise. And many times the age of river cruisers are going to be a little bit higher than your typical ocean cruise. But I found that a lot of people that want to go on a river cruise, they're fairly mobile, because especially in Europe, it's hard to get around if you're not. And Europe is not ADA compliant. So going on a river cruise, you definitely have to be able to be physically fit enough to get yourself around. So typically you do see more adults on a river cruise. If you want a cruise that is exclusively adults, Viking is exclusively adults, You by Uniworld is. So there's definitely some cater more towards the families. Like AmaWaterways, I would say, is more family friendly than some of the other ones. And that's mainly because of their affiliation with Disney. They've created some rooms that will accommodate more people for the families. And on some of their vessels, they even have connecting rooms, which typically that's not something you'd find on a river cruise. And here was a couple more pictures from our cruise. This was taken looking just after we went under a bridge and one of the castles that we passed by. Shore excursions are something that typically is included on a river cruise, but again, this kind of separates the differences between the different cruise lines. On our AmaWaterways cruise, there was at least three excursions on every port that we could do that was complimentary and included in the cruise fare. On Viking, usually it's just one that's included. Some of the other lines will include more. Some of them will include ones that you can purchase for an extra cost, but almost all of them will have at least one excursion that is included in your cruise fare. The views from your room are something that was the main reason I really wanted to go on a river cruise. I wanted to be able to lay in bed and watch a castle go by, and we were able to do that when we went through the Rhine Gorge. So it's kind of nice that with a river cruise, you're right in the heart of everything going on, instead of, you know, when you go to Rome on an ocean cruise and you're an hour plus away from seeing Rome. So it definitely cuts down on your travel time. Now, granted, there were a few times we did have to get on a bus and go a little bit further, like when we went to Heidelberg. But for the most part, everything was fairly close. Swimming is something that, now, you might not think of it, it might not be a big deal, but for some people getting on a boat, they want to go into a pool. The majority of the river cruise lines do not have swimming pools. AMA Waterways, and I think it's Uniworld does have, or it's either Crystal or Uniworld, does have swimming pools on board. And one of them does have an indoor swimming pool, in fact. So if that's something that's a priority, definitely you're going to want to go with a cruise line that has that. Seasickness doesn't happen on a river cruise. If it does, you're going down a flume ride or something, and that shouldn't happen. So, and the time involved, as I was mentioning, they're really not going very far. And one of the things that became pretty obvious to us when we were running into the same bus drivers day after day, because they were following us down the river. And just to give you an example, on a river cruise on the Mississippi River, going from Red Wing to New Orleans, if you were to drive that, it'd take you about 17 and a half hours straight. On a river cruise, it takes 14 days. So they definitely take their time. So it's not like on an ocean cruise where you go into port and you've got 4 hours in port, and then you get back on the ship and you're going to be at a new island the next day. They're going to take their time. You're going to see a lot of the scenery. They're going to make the slow trip down the river or up the river. And that's pretty much all that I have for you right now. I'm going to open it up to any questions. Let's see if... And what I'm going to do is I'm going to unmute everyone, and if you have any questions, just let me know. All right, I think I got most of you unmuted. Some of you have yourselves muted. So anybody have any questions?
What Columbia River Gorge?
I'm sorry?
What cruise line does like the Columbia River Gorge out in Washington?
American Cruise Line and American Queen Steamboat Company, both of them do. Yeah, that's one that I would love to do.
Yeah.
And one that I didn't include on the list, Uncruise. They're an American cruise line, and they do the Columbia and Snake Rivers as well. They also go around the Hawaiian Islands and Alaska. They're not a river cruise boat, but they do cruises on the Snake and Columbia River.
Mm-hmm.
Tracy?
Hi, Marilyn.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm great. And you are as well, I hope. Here's my question. How early in the year do the Christmas market cruises go?
Well,
I mean, does it have to be December, or do they go early?
yes, it's right after our Thanksgiving.
Okay.
So I think last year, because Thanksgiving was a little bit later,
Mm-hmm.
they went before Thanksgiving, but it's real close to like that the last week in November.
Okay.
When we were cruising, we cruised from the 10th through the 17th, and they told us we were about a week early for them.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Let's see. I have one more picture to share.
Oh,
was-
pretty.
That was one of the last locks that we went through on the cruise. So, and that's pretty much all that I have for you guys. And back to here.